Just because you have acne, it doesn't automatically mean that you have oily skin. In fact, there are so many people who struggle with severe breakouts on a dry or on a normal skin type. However, if your skin is on the oilier side, you have indeed chances to deal with breakouts because of it. But here's exactly how to tell if you have oily skin acne, so if your pimples are because of oily skin or not. And in this video, I'm going to give you 5 super specific signs of oily skin acne, not of oily skin in general. But to make it even easier for you, I want to begin with my favorite exercise. Here you have 3 different pictures of acne, A, B, and C, and until the end of this video, I want you to pick the one that you think is caused by an oily skin type alone. And no worries, we will get back to this exercise at the end of this video, and I will reveal the answer myself. But if you pay attention to these 5 signs of oily skin acne, I'm pretty sure you will identify it really easily. Hello and welcome to Acne from A to Z. I'm a pharmacist, and on this channel I teach you how to get rid of your acne by fighting its root cause. So if this is something you are interested in, make sure to subscribe and also follow me on Instagram and on TikTok for more daily video tips. Now here's a timeline of what we're going to cover in this video. We will start right off with the 5 most important signs of oily skin acne, and then we will compare it with other types of acne so you will understand how to tell the difference between this type of acne and other forms. And if you actually have oily skin acne, I'm pretty sure you want to learn how to get rid of it, so this will be our exact next point. And last but not least, we will get back to our exercise, and you will also get a similar one as a homework for next time. So if you're ready, let's dive in. And by far the easiest way to tell if your breakouts are caused by an oily skin type is if you have constant sebum. So your skin is always greasy, it's always very oily, and you always feel the need to cleanse it. And this is probably the most specific sign of an oily skin type. And there are so many people who struggle with this problem, so they have a lot of oil on their skin, a lot of sebum. Their skin and their face feel constantly greasy. So if this is also your case, you should know that you most likely have an oily skin type. And if you also have breakouts, this is most likely the cause. Now, another sign that goes hand in hand with sebum, so they are always together, is a high number of enlarged pores on your face. So whether you knew this or not, a certain amount of enlarged pores is pretty normal for some people, and I'm mostly talking about enlarged pores on the T-zone, so on the forehead and on the nose as well. However, if you have an oily skin type and an oily skin acne, you most likely have enlarged pores all over your face. So we're talking about your cheeks, your chin, your jawline, your temples, which are areas where you would not have so many enlarged pores if your skin type was normal or dry. So in my opinion, this is a really good way to tell if you actually have an oily skin acne or not. But since we're talking about breakouts, let's be a bit more specific about pimples. And when it comes to location, oily skin acne tends to appear in the areas where you have most sebum. And that's because sebum makes your face more likely to break out. Now, all of us tend to have more sebum in the T-zone, so on the forehead, on the nose, and even on the chin sometimes. But if you have an oily skin type, your sebaceous glands will be even more active, which means that you will have even more sebum in these areas compared to a person with a normal or a dry skin type. For this reason, the location that oily skin acne tends to affect the most are the T-zone, so the forehead, the nose, and sometimes even the chin. So if you have a very oily skin type, you should expect to break out on your chin additionally. The good news I can give you here is that generally oily skin acne doesn't cause pimples that are very aggressive, as it's the case of gut acne or hormonal acne, for example. Instead, oily skin acne is going to be a lot more mild. It usually appears as whiteheads and blackheads, which are some forms of pimples that are not very inflamed, not very red, swollen, and consequently, they usually do not leave marks behind after they heal. So this is probably the best thing about oily skin acne. It is common, it is constant, but it is not very severe. Now, I know that some of you may have a very aggressive acne, and I get this question a lot on social media. If I have an oily skin type, but also a very aggressive acne, is my oily skin the cause? So am I breaking out because of this oily skin? And the answer is no. Yes, oily skin definitely contributes to your breakouts, but if this was the only cause of your acne, your pimples would not be as aggressive, not even close. Instead, you may have an oily skin that makes you more likely to break out. However, your aggressive pimples usually have another cause. A lot of times it's an inside cause that you need to find out. But getting back to oily skin acne, another specific thing about it is that it responds really well to classic skincare products that are meant to keep acne under control, as well as to exfoliation. And like I promised, we will talk a bit later about how you should get rid of oily skin acne, so how you should treat it correctly so that you manage to keep it under control. But generally, if you see your pimples getting better with certain skincare products or with exfoliation, your oily skin is most likely the culprit behind them. And that's because what exfoliation does is that it cleanses your skin, so it takes away your sebum, and this is why your skin gets much better after exfoliating. So a lot of people tell me that after exfoliating, they stop breaking out for something like 1 or 2 days, and in the 3rd day, they get again more sebum, so their face feels very oily, and they start to see new pimples. This is a very common situation in oily skin acne, and a lot of times you can exfoliate 1 to 2 times per week depending on what your skin tolerates. But we'll get there in a minute. Now, I just want to give you the general profile of oily skin acne. So how do you know that you are breaking out because of your oily skin, so of your sebum? And generally, your face is greasy on a constant basis. You have a lot of enlarged pores in other areas besides your T-zone. But when it comes to the locations where your acne appears, it is mostly the T-zone. Like I said, you can definitely break out in other areas as well, but you will see that most of your pimples appear on your T-zone, and that's because there you have the highest production of sebum. The good news is that oily skin acne tends to be very mild, so it doesn't really leave any scars behind, and the pimples go away and heal pretty fast. And if you also exfoliate, this can really help keep your acne under control, so its response to exfoliation is a really positive one. Now, a lot of people ask me every day on social media, how can you tell the difference between oily skin acne and other types of acne? And things are pretty difficult with oily skin acne. I would say they are a lot more difficult than if you have other forms of acne. It is quite hard to tell the difference between breakouts caused by oily skin and those caused by stress, by skin bacteria, by skin fungus, and that's because these forms of acne have a lot of similar features. So let's compare them. First of all, let's see the difference between oily skin acne and stress acne, because these two can sometimes overlap. And that's because people who get stress acne also have an oily skin type in many cases. But the easiest way to tell the difference between these two is to look at the time when you get pimples. So if you break out on a regular basis, your acne is most likely caused by an oily skin type. Obviously, if you also have an oily skin. However, if you have an oily skin, but you only break out at times in those periods when you are more stressed, when you don't sleep, when you have a hard time at work, if you only break out in those times, your acne is most likely caused by stress. Because these two forms of acne are very similar from other points of view, and this is why it's pretty hard to tell the difference between them. But if you use this strategy, I'm pretty sure you will be able to do it. Next, let's compare oily skin acne with bacterial acne, and I would actually say that these two are probably the most similar ones, and that's because they overlap very often and they go hand in hand on a regular basis. So here's exactly what this means. Skin bacteria thrives in an environment that is very oily, that is very greasy, which is exactly what oily skin is. So people with oily skin will always be at risk to get acne, more at risk than someone with a dry skin type, for example. However, bacterial acne isn't always mild. It can be mild, but it can also be aggressive. And generally, when your acne is caused primarily by skin bacteria, it will respond best to antibiotics, whether we're talking about pills or about creams, and that's because antibiotics are meant to kill the skin bacteria. However, if your acne is caused by oily skin, antibiotics won't necessarily have a really good effect. So this is probably the easiest way to tell the difference. But if your bacterial acne is milder, you can pretty much get rid of it with the same routine as with oily skin acne. This is why I said that a lot of times they overlap. And lastly, a lot of people ask me about fungal acne, whether it is similar to oily skin or not. And this is probably the easiest one to differentiate from oily skin acne. And that's because fungal acne is always itchy. It tends to appear in groups, so in clusters, not individually, as oily skin acne appears more often than not. At the same time, fungal acne doesn't get better with regular skincare products like oily skin acne does. And if your acne is fungal, you will have to treat it with antifungal products, which don't necessarily work for oily skin acne. So I would say that it's pretty easy to tell the difference between these two. But how can you tell for sure that your acne is because of an oily skin type? Do you have to have all of these 5 signs that I mentioned? Not at all. I would say that generally you need to have an increased production of sebum and also enlarged pores, because these are the specific signs of an oily skin. And if you also break out on a regular basis, so you get pimples very, very often, no matter what you do, this is a pretty good sign that your acne doesn't have any other cause than oily skin. Also, your pimples are pretty mild, so if they are aggressive, I would say that it is not this oily skin type that is causing your breakout. Because normally these pimples are on the milder side. They're usually whiteheads and blackheads, which are some forms that go away pretty easily and they do not leave marks behind. And probably the easiest way to tell if your acne is because of oily skin or not is if the classic acne products work really well. And this takes us to the part where we talk about how you can get rid of your oily skin acne. And this is one of the few forms of acne that responds really well to skincare, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend an internal treatment, a supplement, a tea, a tincture. This is not the case here because oily skin acne responds really well to skincare, and this is because your goal is going to be to keep your sebum under control. So if you manage to keep your sebum under control, you will be able to break out less because of your oily skin. This is the key, and this is what I want you to remember from this video. If you have oily skin acne, the key is to keep your sebum under control. Now, the exact skincare routine that you need to use depends a lot from case to case. I'm going to make a separate video on how to get rid of oily skin acne because there are so many things to tell. But the general rule you want to remember is that the more sebum you have, so the oilier your skin type is, the more products it can tolerate and the more actives you can use. At the same time, the less sebum you have, the less tolerant your skin will be to actives, and the easier it would be to keep your sebum under control. Therefore, if you manage to keep your sebum under control with only one skincare product, it's perfect. I am not a big fan of complex skincare routines, so I always like to go for the minimal. For this reason, you always want to use the least number of skincare products that you need to keep your sebum under control. If you do this, you will stop breaking out. I know some of you are curious about the exact products I recommend, about the exact actives. And I would say that for oily skin acne, most spot treatments are effective. So whether we're talking about things like azelaic acid, retinoids, AHAs, benzoyl peroxide, all of them work as a spot treatment exclusively. However, if you want to exfoliate, which I recommend you to do because exfoliation is a really good way to keep your sebum under control. So if you want to exfoliate, Salicylic acid is a really good ingredient if you have an oily skin type. And that's because it cleanses your skin from all that sebum and it really manages to keep it under control. So it is a perfect ingredient for oily skin acne. And I actually don't even recommend it in many other cases. Therefore, make sure you cleanse your face every single day. Exfoliate once or twice a week depending on what your skin tolerates, and also use spot treatments specifically on your pimples. The only thing I would mention here is to take care not to damage your skin barrier, because many people end up damaging their skin barrier because of the huge number of actives they use. So they exfoliate way too often, they use too many spot treatments, and they end up damaging their skin barrier. And this is actually very common in people with an oily skin type. So you really want to pay attention to this aspect. And if you are interested in how to tell if you have a damaged skin barrier, I have many videos on this topic. I'm going to link them down below. And for those of you who want to learn more about oily skin acne, about how you can keep it under control, I strongly recommend you to check my free ebook. I'm going to link it in the description. It talks about the most important types of acne, and oily skin acne is one of them. So it's going to give you a really good insight on what you should be doing if you have this type of acne. I also have a really detailed course, the anti-acne formula, for those of you who are ready to get rid of their oily skin acne once for all by fighting its root cause. I'm also going to link that in my description as well. But basically, this is how you can get rid of oily skin acne by keeping your sebum under control. This should be your #1 goal. And let's get back to our exercise. I am very curious to hear which answer you picked. So let's start to analyze them and see if you chose the right one. And this time I want to start from the end, so we're gonna look at picture number C. And the first thing that stands out here is the severity of those pimples. So those are some classic cysts that are very aggressive, very painful, very inflamed. They leave marks behind. And if you go back and look at the fourth sign from our list, you will see that oily skin acne doesn't really cause this kind of pimples. So this acne is definitely not caused by an oily skin type. Its position is also not the right one, because we only see pimples on the chin, while the chin is mostly a secondary location for oily skin acne. It usually affects the forehead and the nose primarily, and maybe the chin afterwards. So picture C is not oily skin acne. Picture B is actually extremely aggressive. So I would say that picture number C is a lot milder compared to picture B. I can tell you from sure that this is not acne caused by an oily skin type. It is way too aggressive. It is nodular, and oily skin type alone would never cause such an aggressive breakout. This acne probably has a mix of causes, but I can tell you from the start that it did not begin like this, so it was not as bad when it appeared, and this person probably didn't really find the right treatment or didn't really do anything about her acne, maybe even for years, because you never break out that badly from the start. So the cause is most likely internal, maybe hormonal imbalances, gut issues based on the position. It's most likely not one single trigger, because the acne is way too aggressive. But what you want to remember is that picture B is not an acne caused by oily skin type. Instead, picture A is one. You can see that the face is very shiny. This is the big sign of an increased sebum production. The pimples are not very aggressive. They are mostly located in the T-zone. We don't really know about the products this person has used or has not used, but I am pretty sure that things like benzoyl peroxide or exfoliation would work really well in this case, because it is a really good example of an oily skin acne. Now let me know if you picked the right answer in the comments below. I am very curious to hear. But until next time, I will leave you another similar exercise. So out of these 3 pictures, I am waiting for you to tell me which you believe that it is the closest to oily skin acne. So you want to look at sebum, maybe even at enlarged pores, at the position of the pimples, and even at how severe they are. I'm going to give you the answer myself after a while, so I will pin it in the comments. But until then, I am really eager to hear your answer and find out if you managed to get the right one.